Hi, I'm Sujata Gokhale, co-founder and director of Arnagenics Solutions Private Limited. Welcome to Microbiome Superhero podcast on intermittent fasting, where we turn health concepts into powerful, life-changing conversations. Today we have with us Dr. Rashmi Kulkarni, who is a PhD in molecular genetics and a MSc in microbiology. She has years of experience in cancer research in various universities and in like USA, Qatar, Singapore, and India. So, welcome to this podcast, Dr. Rashmi.
Hi, Sujata. So nice to see you. So it is
Hello,
really interesting.
Rashmi.
What's the topic for today?
It's about intermittent fasting. But before that, let me give you a premise of what exactly happened in my life a few years ago. So, I was about 25 years old, and when I stood helplessly and looked at the hospital corridor, my mother was being wheeled into the operation theater. Her heart was failing, and she had been, kind of struggling with her overweight. Weight. She was overweight and she was struggling with her weight and the weight issues. But it had taken its toll over her heart. And that was the moment which shook my world. Life had spiraled out of control for me, and I knew it was very how fragile life could be at that moment. That was when I reflected on that moment and thought, could it have been prevented? And I decided for myself, never, never again will this ever happen. But if you fast forward a couple of years later, when I underwent my pregnancy and I gained weight, and the same questions repeated itself to me. Was I going to keep retaining this weight, and or was I going to do something to come out of this situation? So that's when people started talking to me about intermittent fasting. So I'm actually curious about intermittent fasting, Dr. Rashmi, and what's the science behind it? Is there anything that can justify intermittent fasting for us?
So there are two important things you talked about here. Firstly, weight issues. Majority of the people who try intermittent fasting are trying to lose weight. That's what they think intermittent fasting is the most beneficial for. The second thing you talked about your experience in the hospital with your mother. So this is about heart disease. So weight and heart disease are quite closely related. We are talking about dysbiosis in the gut. We are talking about a poor diversity of the microbiome. So it is very strongly correlated. When we are talking about intermittent fasting, it is not only for losing weight. It is for improving many different parameters of health. But again, let us step back and say that intermittent fasting is not for everyone. It is something that should be done in the right way. There are very simple ways of doing intermittent fasting. There are many myths that are associated with intermittent fasting. So let us bust one of those today.
Yes, surely, Dr. Rashmi, that's what we are all eagerly awaiting to hear you on. So, the first question that I would really like to raise here is for the benefit of the viewers, let us just explain what is the concept of intermittent fasting.
So intermittent fasting is periods of alternating periods of eating and fasting, where you are allowing the body to digest food and then allowing for it to rest and recover for different periods of time. Now, if we go, this is just the definition, but if we look at different kinds of intermittent fasting, there are many different types that we can see. The most popular one is during a single day in a 24-hour window, you decide a longer period of time, more than 12 or even more, where you fast, and then a shorter period of time where you eat. That is when you are allowing digestion to happen, all of the processes to happen. This is one type of intermittent fasting, which is the most popular. There's another type which is alternate day fasting. So what happens is people eat food normally like they do for one day, and then the next day they do not eat anything, or they eat something that is very low in calories. For example, cucumbers or something that is hydrating but doesn't have too many calories. The third very common type of intermittent fasting is a water only fast, where they consume only fluids. and they take it for 36 hours, 72 hours, 48 or 72 hours, depending on what their goal is. So these are the most common types of intermittent fasting that people are following. These are the ones that we see or hear about the most on social media by many, many different influencers.
So here's an quite an embarrassing question, Dr. Rashmi. When I fast after a couple of hours, I mean fast meaning I have gap between the two meals that I have taken. I might be in a meeting or I might be, on the table discussing something, and then my stomach just goes rumble, rumble, rumble. So what is so odd about that? Does it mean that I'm hungry?
Yes, so it's a very interesting point. We'll go back to something related to intermittent fasting or any kind of fasting for that matter. So, when our stomach is rumbling, so it was rumbling right now for me as well because I have not eaten something for a few hours now. So, what happens here is that there's something called a migratory motor complex, where it is a mechanism of our body where the digestive tract kind of moves in this wave like motion and it's trying to clean itself. It's a mechanism where during this period of fasting, the body is trying to clean itself. So when we have not eaten for a few hours, this happens every 90 minutes. If the body doesn't see food, then it tries to clean itself. That's why we hear this rumbling sound. It doesn't mean that we are hungry, but yes, it means that there's not enough food or no food in our body at that point, and our body is trying to clean itself. That cleaning is happening. So congratulations, it's working fine for you and for me. So we can hear those rumbling sounds
It doesn't
in
mean I
our
have to go and have more food, right?
doesn't really mean, but it means that you have not consumed food for some time and the body is trying to clean itself. Yes, it might be an indicator of there has been a long enough gap and maybe you can eat now. But what happens is if we go back to any kind of fasting, when we sleep, for example, every 90 minutes our body is trying to clean itself. So
Mhm.
when there is no food in the body that remains undigested, the body is better equipped to clean itself. In these cycles of 90 minutes, it cleans itself multiple times. And during the entire night while we sleep, the migratory motor complex is very hard at work cleaning our body or the digestive tract. So that it's a very effective mechanism of cleaning, and it happens when we are fasting. It cannot happen when we have food in our intestine.
Okay. Now, another question that comes up in my mind and I panic is, oh my God, 16 hours of fasting? That looks, unachievable. But it sends me into a kind of a panic mode because I can't think of not having food for 16 hours. But is it must that we need to fast 16 hours, or isn't 12-hour fasting a good idea? What are your thoughts
So this
on,
is something that I find humorous at times because we see that we see it with influencers a lot. We see that 16:8 is a very commonly seen thing that you have to fast for 16 hours and eat only in an 8-hour window. Many people take it as a thumb rule that this is how intermittent fasting is supposed to be, and they do it for all kinds of goals, be it weight loss, be it reversing their diabetes, insulin, improving insulin sensitivity, or any kind of chronic diseases. Now, while it might be helpful for only certain conditions, there are many terms and conditions that apply. So while it might be beneficial for some things, what happens is that it's not suitable for everybody. So let us go back to evolution first. Let us
Mhm.
start at that point. Humans have evolved, like most other animals, to survive in a feast or fast mode. It's either famine or feasting. So, what typically the most widely studied tribe, the Hasda tribe in Tanzania, which still lives in this
Mhm.
hunter gatherer mode. So, the tribe that lives in Tanzania, they are still hunter gatherers. They have to travel for several kilometers. It can be 20 kilometers, it can be more before they find any food. Now, imagine we are the same humans. Our evolution is not any different from the Hasda tribe. It takes thousands, if not millions, of years for any kind of evolution to happen. So, evolutionarily, we are still cavemen. We are still at that stone age. We have not developed, our body has not developed in a very different way. So imagine waking up in the morning, reaching out, opening the refrigerator, and taking some food, warming it up, consuming it. It's so easy to get food now. Is our body ready to accept it? So that is the thing, that we have to go back to evolution and see that our body has evolved to go through these cycles of feasting and famine. When there's a lot of food available, humans were stuffing themselves. They were eating a lot of food because they didn't know where the next food is going to come from, when it would come. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why there were these cycles of fasting and feasting. That's why the pancreas were equipped to produce either glucagon or insulin in response to whether it was for fasting or whether it was feasting, whether it had to burn fat or whether it had to burn carbohydrates. So that is the kind of evolution that humans have, we have evolved that way. But we do not allow our bodies to go through any kind of fasting. If we think about our body clock, now, humans have been evolved to eat only during the daylight hours. That is when our
Yes.
digestive fire, the metabolic fire, is at the highest. That is when we are the best able to digest our food. Even if we look at our microbiome, that is when the microbiome is the best equipped to help us with digestion of food. At night, it changes, the composition is different, it cannot do that. We do not have the digestive juices to digest the food. There are many such things that are happening. Even if we talk about serotonin, how that impacts how the food passes through the digestive tract, we have looked at it in the previous episode on neurotransmitters. All of these point to only one thing: eating during daylight hours. So when we talk about something as complicated or fancy sounding as intermittent fasting, we really just have to go back to the basics. Look at how we have evolved. We have evolved to eat only during daylight hours. There was no light, there was no question for looking out for food.
Yes.
Or now, because light is available 24/7, food is available 24/7, we think we can eat at any time. But can we? Our body is not equipped to digest it at that time. This
Very
is
true.
why that fasting period comes in. So, without taking it to the extreme of 16/8 or whatever it is, I mean, 16/8 is suitable for people who have medical conditions. It should be done under the supervision of medical professionals, or a good nutritionist or things like that. But on their own, if people want to do something like this, it can be very risky.
Yeah, here I'll, relate my story from my friend. She had her weight gain after I mean, during pregnancy, and tried to, reduce her weight post pregnancy doing intermittent fasting. Initially, she was so happy because she lost the kilos just as quickly, as you could think. It was about maybe 4 kilos in a month and things like that. And then slowly, problems started to happen. She used to feel fatigued. Imagine feeling fatigued and running after a newborn baby or a toddler. It was difficult for her to look into the nutrition of a baby. Then she had other problems like losing her hair overnight. It was started very small, but then started showing as clumps of hair on the pillow. So that means she was facing some other issues regarding her health. Then she heard digestive, like you said, we are sensitized to eating during the the circadian rhythm timings, that is from morning to evening before the sunset. She started to have digestive disorders because of that, because her food, I mean, she couldn't eat a little more of the nutritious food even if she wanted to. Fiber started telling on her, it messed up her whole digestive system. So, this myth that there is about intermittent fasting helping you lose weight, how much truth does it hold, Rashmi?
Yes, so there are many layers to it. Now let us break it down layer by
Mm-hmm.
layer. Many different things that are happening there. So just like you said, when I was pregnant, each of my pregnancies, I gained some weight. Well, I've been a very lean person all my life, but even that extra as some weight that I had additionally, I always thought that yes, of course I'm going to exercise and try to get rid of it. Of course I'm going to do something to lose that weight, but I didn't. Life catches up, and then you have so much work to do that your health takes a backseat. That's what happened. And then a few years ago, I decided enough was enough. I have to lose that extra 5 kilos or whatever it was that I wanted to lose. And I did that using intermittent fasting, but not the extreme one that we are talking about, the 16/8. It was in a very controlled, slow manner that was not extreme. What happens in 16:8 is that you are depriving yourself of nutrients for a very long period of time. And then people have things like coffee or tea or whatever in the morning, thinking that, oh, they are not going to add any calories, so that is okay. And what happens is it increases the acidity in your digestive tract. We are trying to make our body alkaline to keep it away from chronic diseases, and now with this coffee and tea, people are making it more acidic. When the body is acidic, it wants food. It is expecting some food because of this acid in the stomach. When it doesn't get food, what is going to happen? It's complete chaos. So that's a bad beginning. And then what happens in that very short 8 hour window is that you are trying to cram in as much food as possible. How can you do that? It's not possible for many people when the metabolic rate is not high, when you cannot digest food that is consumed within that 8 hour period. How are you going to get the kind of nutrients that your body truly requires? So
Yes.
even for people who lose that weight that they are trying to lose. So I lost weight when I was doing intermittent fasting for a short period of time. I lost all of those five. I actually lost 7 kilos. But I was tracking what I was losing. When people lose weight, they forget that they can lose water. People who are overweight and suddenly lose a lot of weight, it is water that they are losing first. Is that
Yes.
what they want to lose? Water is extremely important for our cells. There's fat that people can lose, there's muscle that people can lose, there is bone density that people can lose. Do you want to lose muscle or bone or water? What you want to lose is fat. So we have to induce our body to a state where it goes into the fat burning mode, which of course happens in intermittent fasting, but then it has to be supported with the right kind of nutrition. So we have to pick a time period which is suitable for our health, our conditions that we have, our metabolic state, our energy levels. We should know whether we have energy or whether we are fatigued after doing this kind of intermittent fasting. We should understand whether we are receiving the right kind of nutrients, whether they are enough in that time period. This is the problem with the 60 day, and we have to know what we are losing. The easy way to track it is using a BMI scale or a smartwatch. It's not very expensive, and it can give at least a rough idea. If you cannot do a DEXA scan, which is something much more complex, at least a smartwatch or a BMI scale can really help in tracking what we are losing.
Now I'm going to ask you an interesting question. What happens to the microbiome diversity in such cases?
Yes, so it really depends. Very, very interesting question. When we are talking about healthy ways of intermittent fasting, before we
Mm.
go to the microbiome diversity, again, I'm saying healthy ways because daylight hours can be very different in places where people live. In some places there's sunlight for a very long period of time, in some places there's no sunlight. It doesn't mean you don't eat at all. But if you pick a decent time where you start, for example, if you have your dinner between 7 and 7:30 at night. Now I'm going to start with dinner because we can start the breakfast based on that. And then you leave a window of maybe 12 to 13 hours. What happens in this 12 to 13 hours? It's a golden period where in the first 6 to 8 hours of this fasting period, our body burns up, it digests the food that we have consumed, it burns up the carbohydrates or the sugar that is coming from that food. And then 6 to 8 hours in that, after that, the next 4 to 5 hours, the body starts burning fat because there is no more carb that it can burn, there's no more sugar available for it to burn. So the migratory motor complex, it keeps burning, it keeps cleaning the body starts burning fat even when you are sleeping, if your metabolism is working fine. That is the time when the body really starts burning fat. So even 12 to 13 hours of fasting is intermittent fasting. It is very easy to achieve. That's what I did. I was just stretching it to 13 hours. That was enough for me to lose all of the weight. I did not have to take anywhere past 14 at the max. 16 is very extreme for me. I would never do that. So that's what I tried, and I was tracking all the time. What happens when we allow this fat loss to happen, when we allow this, it encourages, when we are getting the right kind of nutrients, it helps us build muscle mass. All of this improves our insulin sensitivity, and this encourages growth of really healthy microbes because we are losing fat, we are gaining muscles, we are using our blood sugar in the most effective way, we are still insulin sensitive. All of these factors improve the diversity of the gut microbiome immensely, and don't we all want that?
Very nicely put, Dr. Rashmi. But what happens when we go for a longer period of fasting? There is a growth of
Yes,
beneficial
absolutely.
microbes. Yes, but does
Yes.
it always do the benefits, or do they have their
Yes.
side
So
effects?
again, it depends on your metabolism. If that's what you can do, if you have health conditions, sure, go ahead for 16/8, but with supervision. But what happens with prolonged fasting is that when we fast, there are these beneficial bacteria called Akkermansia mucinophila. So what Akkermansia does is that it eats up the mucus lining. So this mucus lining is very healthy. It's a very nice layer of mucus that helps us absorb nutrients, and it also is a protective layer that is present on our intestinal cells. So we have to remember our intestinal cells are only a single cell layer thick, and there's a mucus layer on top of it. So this is degraded every day by Akkermansia, which is a part of our gut microbiome. So which sits on top of this mucus layer, and it eats it up. It encourages the intestinal cells to make new mucus, and that's how it is renewed all the time. So this is a very healthy way of keeping the intestine in good shape. And this is how the tight junctions between intestinal cells are also tight enough so that they do not allow things to pass through. Only nutrients can pass through this barrier. But what happens in extended fasting is that the mucus layer is not renewed. If it doesn't suit your metabolism, it is not renewed. Akkermansia doesn't have anything to eat because there's no new fresh production of mucus. So what happens is that it starves. Then you might see a loss of the Akkermansia population. You might see disruption of the tight junction. Now the cells that were supposed to be very, very joined and close together are going to separate. It allows everything to pass through. It allows things that are not supposed to go to the blood circulation, to the immune system, to the nervous system that sits right below it. All of those things start going out, which is not healthy. It leads to inflammation. It leads to a lot of chronic diseases. If you are trying to prevent them, you might actually get chronic diseases by doing something like this.
So besides the 16 to 8 and 5 is to 2, what other forms of intermittent fasting are, trending around
Yes,
the
so I
world?
talked about the alternate day fasting. I did not talk about the 5 2, where people actually eat normally for 5 days, and then for 2 days they eat food that is in at least 5 or 600 calories lower than what they tend to eat. So this is also something that people do. It is more of some thing that is easy to adjust. Like they want to go and eat, they want to socialize. So it is very difficult to do intermittent fasting every single day. It is kind of an adjustment so that people can still have the lifestyle that they want to, and on 2 days they are going to reduce their caloric intake. But again, when we are talking about just calories, I don't think that's a very great idea, because calories doesn't really doesn't mean anything. We can burn trash and generate calories out of it.
Yes.
Calories, it is the quality of nutrients that we are eating. When we talk about an apple, for example, we say an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Well, an apple a day used to keep a doctor away 50 years ago or 100 years ago, because it had that kind of nutrition. But today, does it have the same kind of nutrition? The soil is so depleted. There are so many chemicals that are used to make that apple grow. It is not the same apple as it was before. So when we are talking about any kind of food, we have to make sure we are receiving the nutrition that our body is actually requiring. Only then we can decide which kind of intermittent fasting is good for us. Again, we don't need to take it to extremes. 12 to 13 hours is great.
So, Rashmi, I have one more question for you here.
Yes.
Now, we talked about, people who wanted to lose weight. But what about people who have chronic conditions, especially cardiac issues or, issues with the kidney or diabetes for that specific reason, that specific cases of those kind of chronic diseases? Should they be doing that?
So while intermittent fasting is very healthy, but as I said, 12 to 13 hours is good enough. That is something that people can do on their own, because it's something that has come with us being humans. It's an evolutionary thing. But again, I would say that if people have serious chronic conditions, it's always better to consult a health professional or a good nutritionist to decide what kind of fasting, intermittent fasting, is it required. If they need a lot of nutrients, they should not be fasting. But if they want to increase insulin sensitivity, for example, diabetics, again they have to make sure they are getting the right kind of nutrition in that time period, and they do not have those insulin spikes. So yes, that can really help. It can be very helpful for even people who are suffering from cancers. But we absolutely have to take this very seriously, that all of this has to be done with proper guidance from a medical professional. This is not something to be done on your own. Just because we see influencers saying that, oh, you should do intermittent fasting, it is going to give all of these benefits. We have seen so many cases of nutritional deficiencies, of people trying it on their own, losing hair. You know, you lose weight and then you lose all of your hair, in men especially. Men go bald when they do intermittent fasting on their own. They don't know, they are saying that what is the harm, that we will lose the weight that we want. Not only do they not know what they have lost because they are not tracking it, they are also losing hair. It is probably messing up with their hormones. If we talk about females, it messes up with the hormones even more. So if females are thinking about intermittent fasting, it probably is ideal to have it shorter. 12 to 13 hours is ideal. Otherwise, it may end up messing with the hormones. So again, it is not a blanket thing, that it's not a one size fit all. You have to see what your requirements are. As always, we always say that what is the objective of intermittent fasting? Why do you want to do it? Look at that objective, then take a step back. Are you healthy enough to do it on your own? I would still recommend getting medical advice, or from at least a professional, and then going for it. So these are the things that I wanted to share. Chronic conditions, yes, it is beneficial for not just chronic conditions, even for others who do not have them. This is great for preventing chronic conditions because it improves the diversity of the gut microbiome. When we have a good, diverse gut microbiome, it makes anti inflammatory metabolites like short chain fatty acids that we always talk about. And these anti inflammatory metabolites keep the tight junctions really tight. They help keep the intestinal barrier healthy. They prevent inflammation in the first place, which is the root cause of majority of the diseases that we are talking about. This is why intermittent fasting, or we really don't need to use this fancy term intermittent fasting. It is an evolutionary thing. Just stick to your circadian rhythm.
Right.
That is the most important thing. Just know what your metabolic fire is, know when you are likely to be hungry, and have food ready. Food that is healthy, food that is nourishing, food that provides you with the right kind of
Yes.
nutrients that your body truly
And
requires.
at regular intervals, that has been, in a protocol or a disciplined manner from the time you have started to, think about
Yes.
reducing.
Other thing to
Yes.
remember is that, when we say intermittent fasting and when we label it like that, then it becomes kind of a hard rule that, oh, I need to follow. I have to follow this 14-hour fast or 16-hour fast or whatever it is. It doesn't work that way. So if we think about what kind of work we do in our profession, for example, on some days we are required to be a lot more creative. We have a lot of work that needs creative thinking. On some days we are just typing away at our computers without thinking that much. So the kind of work that we are doing is different. The nutrition that we need for that is also very different. So we have to
Yes.
think about what our body requires. We have to listen to that and then tweak what we are doing throughout the day. So that this is why the 12 to 13 hours is so beautiful. It allows us to adjust it to in a very fluid state. We do not have to build a wall around ourselves saying that, "Oh, I absolutely need to fast for 14 or 16 hours." No, it doesn't work that way. Our requirements every day are very, very different.
And like I told you previously, it can create panic situations. That means it could act as a stressor for, mind issues, mental wellness. You kind of get intimidated with the feeling that, oh my God, I have to, finish my meal in this 8 hour
Yes,
time frame, without which I don't think I can eat for the next 16 hours. So it is kind of very, very claustrophobic, or very, very stringent on you. So it kind of creates a stressor for you. So yes, thank you, Rashmi, again.
thank you so
Okay.
much. So this is
Thank
how, without making any rules, we can make this very sustainable, very effortless. So do not stick to these labels of intermittent fasting or things like that. Just stick to circadian rhythm. I think that sounds a lot better, and
Yes.
it sounds a lot more sustainable and acceptable for everyone.
Yes, Rashmi. Thank you. Thank you for shedding light on this important topic. So, here's what I have learned. Health isn't about extremes. It is not about starving your gut or skipping meals or following trends that promise quick fixes. Because when you lose the sight of balance, your body pays the price. Whether it is, losing hair, poor sleep, poor nutrition, or your weight coming back. So, if any of you viewers are considering fasting, ask yourself this question: is this sustainable for me? Is it going to help or hurt my body? Because true health is about nourishing yourself, not depriving yourself. So, viewers, if you are aiming for health that lasts, not that health that fades. And if this particular podcast resonates with you, please share it with someone or a person who is going through this trauma or through this trend. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast.
So, viewers, if you found this useful, if you thought that intermittent fasting was for you or was not for you, these are the basics. If you have learned anything new, if you found this useful, do not forget to like this. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and to share it with anybody who might benefit from this. Thank you so much. See you in the next one.